we live just south of Coldwater now, so still pretty close by. Again, I thank you for having me come and be a guest talking here. I wanted to keep a very open sort of approach to what we talk about today. So I myself am going to cover a couple of sort of thematic topics, and then as Teresa said, I'm happy to take questions. Allison will probably be far more interesting to hear from than I am, but I'll do my best. So one of the things I want to talk about is just, a little combination of the history of how I ended up in the Senate and what I've seen there. And, hopefully the reason I'll share some of these things is just to get people thinking about what we all should be doing as we engage in politics. And that doesn't make sense yet. Hopefully it will after I talk a little bit. So I ran in 2022, and at that time had never run for office anywhere, at any time, any place. And sort of actually by coincidence of that being a year when they massively redrew the maps. They didn't just do, every 10 years we redraw the maps, but this time it was the first redistricting after a new method was created, the Citizens Redistricting Commission. And it resulted in these wildly gerrymandered districts that look nothing like anything we've ever seen before in Michigan. We used to prioritize having them be compact so that your senator, would be as close to the community as possible. Now, like I said, you have things that go from Springport, Michigan, all the way to Lake Michigan, New Buffalo. But as a byproduct of that, I didn't expect when I entered the race, but it turned out that I was running against an incumbent sitting Republican senator. I was comfortable with that, but it made it a pretty difficult race as far as such things go. And it was one of these things where, I couldn't realistically expect to get a meeting with anybody in Lansing to even go sit down and say, hey, this is why I'm running for Senate, this is what I'd like to do, which I was okay with. I wasn't looking for a ton of meetings there. But it meant that most people that were, the sort of smart people in politics lined up behind my opponent and said, she's the sitting senator. She's going to end up being the senator again. She's the safe bet. We'll just support her and we won't think about it too much. And so I had, most local government officials, most people from, all 7 sheriffs, all 7 prosecutors, Right to Life, Farm Bureau, all the things that usually when people are running, they go seek out these endorsements, were supporting my opponent. On one level, that was frustrating. It was difficult. I thought I was a good candidate. I knew what I stood for. I knew why I wanted to serve the people. But I want to highlight that story more to say something else, which is that it ended up being a blessing in disguise. I was only able to win my campaign by ignoring all of the centers of power and focusing on one thing, which was the people that I needed the votes from. And I went out and very aggressively knocked thousands and thousands of doors, built a volunteer team. When my wife helped me organize the campaign, we did this we didn't have a consultant when we started, we didn't have anything. Now we had a few really key ingredients that helped with that. But the focal point for me again was, by cutting through some of the noise of, the way people think politics has to work, in just focusing on going to the people and asking them and saying, this is what I stand for, this is what I believe, this is what I think is broken about our government, this is what I think we should do to make it better. I was ultimately able to be successful. That's why I'm standing here. I'm a state senator. I didn't actually find out until the race was done that, I forget the year, but I think a sitting Republican state senator had not been defeated in a primary since the early 1980s. And we won 61-39, not particularly close. Not. And the other thing about this story is that what I feel that it gave me as a senator in Lansing was an ability to go up there and not be overly worried about what the people with power think about how I'm doing my job. They can dislike me, they can be upset, they can say I won't endorse you, and I can say, well, you didn't last time, my focus gets to remain, and this is what I try to do every day. And if I fail, everybody fails to some degree, but if I fail, I always encourage people to tell me. But I try to keep my focus on the people that I serve and the problems they face and some of the structural problems with government that I think create those problems. So that's theme number one, is that I think, I also try to be an example to some people up there that the system of government we have right now, which is largely that people who will do it the opposite way. They'll focus on a few key, influencers or centers of power. A lot of it, frankly, comes back to money. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But they think they need to get these things lined up. They need to raise enough campaign cash to pay one set of consultants to go out and poll the people to find out what do the people want to hear from me. And then they take the other pot of money and they go pay another set of consultants to send campaign information to those people telling them what they found out they want to hear. And at no point in time along the way is there any necessary alignment with, does that person who's seeking that office, maybe they agree, maybe they don't, but that's not the point. The point is, find out what the people want to hear, get enough money to send enough campaign messages out convincing the people that that's what you believe, right? And you do it. And I think that's a paradigm that's got to change. I think we've got to have more people serving who realize that the most important thing we can do, the duty that we have as people representing the people, is to not just play this game of how do I convince them during a primary or during an election that I'm a good person, but how do I actually try to serve in a way that I should. And one of the keys to that is kind of understanding what is the state of play in politics right now. And this is one of the other big themes that I just wanted to discuss with all of you. You're free to, do everything short of, don't throw anything that's like made out of metal at me if I say something you disagree with. But I'll just give you kind of like my view of what I think is happening politically right now at a very high level. By high level, I mean across the entire country. There's no force in American politics that's been more impactful in my lifetime than, and people have different names for it, but it started in 2015, and probably the most common name people would give it is the MAGA movement. Call it the Trump era of politics. You call it whatever you want. Tea Party was a big deal in its own way, but nothing that I've ever seen had as much durability over. We're now past the 10-year mark from when President Trump came down the golden escalator and said, I'm going to run for president. And it started a movement. And he had 4 years as president. We then had the great, which answers the great steal. I was just going to focus on, we had the great, valley of disappointment of the Biden presidency. But through all of that, a lot of people that supported the MAGA movement or the America First movement stuck it through, and Trump got elected again for a third time in 2024, right? And now here we are, right? He's president. And I don't want to get into too much all the policy that's going on right now, but I think a lot about what is it that built that movement. The only person that was able to win statewide in a state like Michigan multiple times over the last decade, same for a lot of swing states. The only person, when you talk to political consultants, everybody's trying to figure it out right now, how do you get the Trump voter to go vote for other people and not just Trump, right? And I think a lot of what it comes down to is you got to figure out, what was that movement about? What is the most crystallizing sort of philosophy that was going on? Because of course the detractors, and even some of the people internally, and even Republican, big brain consultants, they have all sorts of answers of what they think drove Trump's success. Most of them, I think, missed the mark. Maybe we can have a little fun here. Does anybody sit and think about these things and have like a 1 or 2 sentence answer? Does anybody want to take a crack at what you think the real centerpiece of the Trump movement? Of course, Rutan has an answer already, right? He came in before I get,
I think finally they found a politician that speaks like them, feels like them, and isn't an insider. And I think those were the key issues for most people. You might not like what he says, but it's like the old the movie. He may not be the Batman we wanted, but he was the Batman we needed.
Yeah. What do you got?
People were just fed up